We are now at the fourth session that we have about this subject, the Hebrew Roots movement, a movement of God, or a fiction of man's imagination to create a religious system by which we enslave people. Well, from the previous 3 times we spent time together, we have now actually told you every time that it can either be a move of God, if it is going to be something where we will have as focus our relationship with the Father. But if it's about the things, then we're creating another religious system, and we could just as well have stayed in the other one. It is the same thing. It's like changing one idolatry for another. In this session, I want to look at the concept of law, because I think this is the most misunderstood thing in the whole of the Bible. In the New Testament, the word that is used in the Greek is the word nomos. Whenever you see that word law, it says nomos. And we, and especially people within Hebrew root circles, just change that immediately in their thinking to Torah, which is the Old Testament word for that which we translate as law. Now, let's first look at what the word Torah means, and then go and look at the New Testament concept of the word law. The word Torah in the Old Testament refers to the first 5 books that we have: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And that word is actually very wrongly translated as law, because the word really doesn't mean law. What it means is instructions. Instructions. Instructions of what? Well, you remember when the Israelites came out of Egypt, they were at Mount Sinai just over 50 days after that Passover. And now they're standing there, and God is about to make a covenant with them. So Moses sets up these markers, because God tells him, put the markers over there. People shouldn't come closer than that. There must still be a distance. The people come up, God descends upon the mountain, and there's smoke and fire, and they hear the voice of God, and they say, Moses, no, this is too much. We can't listen to this. Please, you go and speak to God. And then you come and tell us what he told you. And we will do whatever he says. We have seen his glory. We've seen his might. I mean, this is it. We'll do it. We're ready. So Moses ascends upon the mountain, and the people are down in the valley. And God then, when Moses came there, gave Moses these 2 tablets of stone with the instructions written upon it, the Torah written upon it. And while God is speaking to him, he's actually telling him, Moses, this is what the people's hearts look like. Hardened, stone hearts. Because God wanted to write on their hearts the law, but they closed their hearts. And that is what Hebrews chapter 3 says. They hardened their hearts before God. So, while God is speaking to Moses, God says, Moses, do you hear the noise down there in the camp? He says, they are playing the harlot. Why is God saying that they're playing the harlot? Because when they stood in front of that mountain, God wanted to take them as his wife. So God says, Moses, stand aside. I'm going to kill them all. I'm going to start over with you. And Moses says, no. You can't do that. What will the people say? As if God's going to be worried about what the people say. He doesn't have a problem with that. But he then hands Moses these 2 tablets of stone, and he says, okay, you are so wise, go and sort out this problem. So Moses goes down the mountain. He knows exactly what he has in his hands. He has the instructions for this marriage, a ketubah, a marriage contract in his hands. And he knows that once he's read this to the people, God will have to kill them. Because they're in idolatry. They've taken another husband. So this is a problem. So Moses is not coming around the mountain very happy and then suddenly see the people and get a fright because they are busy with this golden calf. No, he knows this. God's already told it to. You know, he knows this from the top of the mountain. What he's actually doing is they're walking there and say, how am I going to get around this? I'm not going down with this. I read it to them. God has to kill them. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to tear up the contract so that they can't read it. So when he saw them, he threw it and he broke it. He broke it so that they couldn't read it. He goes down into the mountains, and down the mountain there into the camp. He says, what did you guys do? Are you crazy? You got married to God, he's going to kill you. So those of you who want to serve God, stand here. The other 3,000, bam, they get killed. Okay, 3,000 of them. So Moses goes back up onto the mountain. God says, okay, you wisecrack, go and get us 2 another pieces of stone. You've actually solved the problem. The riddle is solved. He writes it again. Moses goes down. And then they put these 2 stones, these tablet stones, in the Ark of the Covenant. And after that, it's called the tablets of the testimony. A testimony of what? A testimony of this marriage relationship between God and the people. But this marriage relationship is not a hard and fast thing. You do something wrong, I kill you. Many times did they run after other gods and God didn't kill the whole nation. How many times did it happen? Because you act in the spirit of that instruction. I don't walk around in my pocket with a contract about my marriage with my wife, and then every time she does something, take it out and says, you know, clause number 735 says, if you do this, I have to. No, there is grace. There's more grace revealed in the Old Testament than what you can think of. Every time they go wrong, God says, oh, come on, guys. Come on, what are you doing? Turn around. Let's fix this thing. Every time he does it. He's acting in the spirit of a relationship. But these tablets of stone is telling them what his expectation is. It's the instructions for a marriage contract. That's what the word Torah means. When we get to the New Testament, the word nomos does not mean exactly the same. And now every time we read the word law in the New Testament, we want to immediately put it on an equal level, say law in the New Testament equals Torah in the Old Testament. I'm sorry, it's a misinterpretation. There's only one place in the Bible where we read about it, that the Bible says that we've been set free from the law. And that's in Romans. Romans chapter 7 deals with the fact that God has set us free from the law. In the beginning of chapter 8, again, it says it. But what law is this? Is it the Torah? No. You've got to look at it in the context of what chapter 6, chapter 7, and chapter 8 of Romans says. Chapter 6 says, it starts with this. It says, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Why? Because chapter 5 said, you can sin as much as you want to, there's grace. I mean, go for it. See if you can outrun God's grace. It's impossible. But then chapter 6 says, shall we abide in sin? that grace may abound. God forbid. That's a very good Jewish statement. God forbid. How can we that have died to sin still live in it? And then chapter 6 continue with this whole thing of the fact that we need to not be subject to sin anymore or married to the one who wants to lead us into sin. Because that's what chapter 7 starts with. It says, if you're married to somebody, you're only free once that one dies. What were we married to? We were married to sin and death. And so that husband that we served, into whose image we grew, this image of the serpent, had to die. And John chapter 3 verse 14 says, he took that image upon himself, he took that serpent image upon himself, and that died on that cross. So that husband that you and I had, sin, died. And then at the end of chapter 7, it says we have now been free from this law of this husband, this sin, this law of sin. That law of sin did not originate at Mount Sinai. It originated in the Garden of Eden, where man chose to marry another image, the image of the serpent. And so throughout the whole of the New Testament, you need to be very careful to just take the word law and turn it into Torah. Because it's not correct. It's not good biblical way of interpreting it. Because chapter 8 that exactly says this. It says, you have been set free from the law of sin and death. Chapter 5, 6, 7, 8, same thing. It's a law. Paul is trying to tell us there was a law that you've been under. A law of sin. Something that said you had to do it. Because it has to do with a nature. A serpent nature. That you submitted yourself to and you got married to. But now this husband is dead. Sin has died with him on the cross. Not sins, but sin. So when chapter 8 of Romans starts, it says this, that there are two laws that you can be under. The law of life in the Messiah, or the law of sin and death. But then he says, but you've been set free from the law of sin and death. Why are you still serving this law? It's not necessary. The husband is dead, guys. And when he says that this law is dead, he's not speaking about that which Moses received from God. No, what it's speaking about is the law of sin and death. This thing that became part of us when we sinned, when we got a sinful nature, and we were bound to sin because of that sinful nature. And now our minds, our paradigm is all locked up in that sinful nature. Yet we've been set free of it, we are still living under it. It's like a woman whose husband has died and she cannot get beyond the death of her husband. She's still living as though he's still alive. His clothes are all still in the closet, hanging there. Everything is exactly like he is. And you know, he's even written a testament from where he can rule you from the grave. Tell you what you should and shouldn't do. And she can't get beyond that. There is a soul tie that's holding you into this thing. And we need to understand, once the husband is dead, the woman is free. She's free. So, what is dead? The law of Moses? No. That Torah, it's not speaking about it. It's speaking about the law of sin and death. Yes, we have been set free from the law, but not the Torah. That's not what it says. It says we've been set free from the law of sin and death. That's what we're free of. We've been freed from this old husband, this one that controlled us and wanted to say, you have to do what I tell you. You have to sin when I tell you. Now, it's time that we start reading the Bible within its context. And I want to look you in the eye today and I want to tell you, if you are reading the Bible the way you want to and interpret the way you want to, you will end up in error. You've got to read the full context of what he said. And this is the great thing. This is a relationship. God has set us free from the relationship with the old nature. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 17 says, if we therefore be in the Messiah, we're a new creation. The old things have passed away. It's gone, it's over. I don't have to serve that anymore. And Romans 6 says, reckon yourself then dead to sin. Sin is the problem. Now I want to ask you something. If this Torah was so horrible as we say, why do you think God gave it to his nation? No, it was instructions. He said, guys, this is a constitution for this marriage. This is instructions for a marriage, this Torah. And he's not saying, I'm setting you free from that. The fact is, we've never been married to him under those instructions. That's a different story. Yes, the Jewish nation has been walking within that marriage confines, and yes, they can also just, like us, only attain this real relationship with the Father through the Messiah. But when you got born again, did you get born again under the instructions of the Torah? No. You got born again in a relationship of persuasion, of faith. Your cubit. So I need to say, now I don't know the instructions yet. To me, all I know is I fell in love with this Messiah. And he says, yes, come unto me. Come unto me. And I walk into this relationship, and then he says, look, with those guys, I gave them all the instructions. They had a really hard time keeping it. With you, I'm going to do it differently. With you, I'm going to give it to you little by little through a revelation. And so I'm walking with him, and he says to me, I want to give you the instruction of walking in righteousness under my protection. Okay, so how do I do that? He says, look, let me explain it to you. This is difficult. It's a spiritual instruction which you have to have a frame of reference for. So I'm going to give you something called a prayer shawl. And through this prayer shawl, I'm going to explain it to you. It's like taking something out of nature, something from our surroundings, and trying to explain some spiritual value to us. You see, when you put yourself under that piece of material that's over this cloth, then what you are saying is, I'm putting myself under the authority of God. Do you understand that? You enter into this relationship by saying, he's my king. Okay, I put it over me. Yeah, okay, now, I've got this crown on. What now? He says, see, once you've got the crown on, I want to wrap you in righteousness. So I clothe myself in righteousness. I clothe myself in this cloth that represents it. So, okay, yes, okay, I understand that now. So see, on the corners of these, I put these things called knafim, or wings. Right? I want to bring you under my protection. But what is this all about? Yes, we've been bound together in a covenant. Me, the Father, Yud Hey Yah, and you, man, Vav Hey, have become one. And that's exactly how this is turned and knotted together to say Yud Hey Vav Hey Echad. God and man is one. How? Oh, we didn't become one like they did back then there at the Mount Sinai. No, what I did was, you see that blue line? That's the Messiah. Yeah? You see, He has brought about the fact that you've become one with me. Oh, wonderful. Yes. And you know what? Go and count those things. You will see it adds up to 613. That's the full number of the instructions. So for now, I see you as having fulfilled all 613 of those instructions in the Messiah. Therefore, you've been joined with me in this covenant, and you are under my protection, covered with my righteousness, because you have accepted me as your king. Wow! Now I understand it because I've touched it. He says, okay, now by the way, I want you to be faithful. I want you to do what I tell you. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. He says, okay, so here is an instruction. I want you to pray with us, because I want this to become a personal tent for you. Why? Because I want you to understand the spiritual value of that which I have for you, and you can only do it once you connect to it in this physical experience that you have. Okay. So I start praying with this. And then at some stage he says, you know what, you can just pray without that. It's not necessary anymore. But shouldn't I be bringing it with me? I feel like I'm not secure anymore. No. Have your security in me. Have your security in me. You're understanding this now. And then for a time you don't do it, and then suddenly he says, oh, by the way, I would like you to pray with your prayer shawl today. Why? He says, because I want you to come to a deeper level of understanding of what this righteousness is, and what my protection is, and what this covenant is, and the fact that you're under my rulership. And now I do it, and suddenly there's a greater revelation. This is not religion. This is not coming under some kind of law. No, this is just following the instructions of my husband. Having a relationship with him. Through him. With the Father in heaven. So that in the end, I will grow into his image. Like a wife that grows into the image of her husband, as the congregation grows into the image of the Messiah, so that eventually the aim of it will be this relationship that we have with the Father. I'm prophetically acting out certain things in the natural so that I can understand it in the spiritual. Hebrew roots is really a move of the Spirit of God if we understand it in a shadow and type manner, in a prophetic utterance, so that we can have a greater understanding of who the Father is and what our relationship with him is through the Messiah. But if you are just going to change your old religious actions with new ones like praying with a prayer shawl, blowing shofars, all of these things that we're talking about, keeping Shabbat, keeping the festivals, and you're missing the point. Then you're busy with a man-made structure of religion that's just making you feel good about yourself. But it's not helping you in your relationship with the Father. We, as Gentiles, have been called into walking with God in a relationship with him. And he understands that my relationship with him and how I understand things is also according to that which I experience in the here and the now, in the natural, in my environment. And so, Father, I want to come and pray for every one of us, that we will have a greater revelation of who you are, and the fact that you have sent your Son, Yeshua, to be our Messiah, our King. That in Him we have fulfilled all the obligations for this covenant that we have with you. And that we are under the wings of your protection, clothed in righteousness. And thank you that you're giving us these things. That we can experience Shabbat and the festivals and all of these things not as religious acts of idolatry, but as a freedom of having a revelation of what you want for us. Amen.